Christian County's interview with General Grant. We're very lucky to have the General here with us today. General, from what I understand, in the year 1860-61, you were in Missouri. Can you tell us what was going on with the war here in Missouri? And
I had gotten back into the Army in June of '61 when Governor Richard Yates of Illinois appointed me to be the colonel commanding of the 21st Illinois. And we were at Camp Yates in Springfield, Illinois, I suspect a sister city. And I was at the camp of instruction where we were training men how to become soldiers. And on July the 3rd of '61, I moved my 1,000 or so troops of the 21st Illinois out of Illinois, marched them to Quincy, and then on July 12th, we crossed into Missouri. So from July the 12th of '61 until September the 4th, when I reported to Cairo, Illinois, to assume command of the district, southeastern Missouri, northwestern Tennessee, and I'm sure you'll appreciate the vagueness of western Kentucky so far as I may be able to penetrate it. Had some leeway. So from mid-July to late last of August, I was in Missouri. Now, being here in Springfield is particularly of note for me because several things happened here in just a few days at Wilson's Creek, and I should like to talk about them with you.
Absolutely. Tell us more about what happened
I was in the Ironton, Mexico, Missouri area, and Ironton being some 70 or so miles southwest of St. Louis. I had been notified through the newspaper on July 31st that I had been named by President Lincoln. My name was first, and that's important. If the ranks come by order of names, I was first of 7 that the president had nominated to be a brigadier general, 1 star, of volunteers. Nobody told me about it. I had to find out about it from the newspaper. My chaplain was reading a copy of the Missouri Democrat, and just a few days old, and showed me the list. And I told the chaplain, I had no notion of this. I had no idea. I gave him the paper back and walked away. The chaplain was astonished. He later wrote, he said, General Grant treated it of no more consequence as batting away a fly. But I was nominated. Now that didn't mean I was a general, but I was then moved to Ironton from Mexico, Missouri to Ironton to take charge of a camp there and address some disciplinary issues. And on August the 7th of '61, I got the letter from the Secretary of War that I was indeed commissioned Brigadier General of Volunteers. And I sat down and promptly wrote my acceptance, because you don't actually have the rank or the pay until you notify the War Department that you accept the rank. So now, as I said, that's August 7th. Now, let's talk about what was going on in the area around which we sit. Wilson's Creek is just a few miles, I think about 10 miles or so, out of town here in Springfield, Missouri. And it was something of an accidental battlefield, but it's fraught with import for you folks in Missouri and for everyone else in the war, and particularly for Nathaniel Lyon. Now, Nathaniel Lyon on May the 10th was Captain Nathaniel Lyon. He's a West Point graduate, class of 1841. I knew Captain Lyon when I was a cadet, because my first 2 years at the academy, 39 through 41, were his second 2 years. So I knew him as a cadet. Red-headed fellow, he didn't have a beard at that time. When he graduated, he went out west and then he fought in the Mexican War, and our paths did not cross again. When I was here in Missouri, well, before I got here, I was in Illinois mustering in 3 regiments, Anna, Belleville, and Mattoon. On May the 10th, I found out in Belleville, Illinois, they weren't ready to be mustered in. It'd be a couple of days. So I took advantage of that time to go over into St. Louis. I wanted to see John C. Fremont, who was the general commanding the area, to try to get back in the Army. This is before I got the commission. Remember, it was May the 10th. I didn't get my commission until July 17th or June 17th. And I didn't get to see General Fremont, but I did get to see Captain Nathaniel Lyon. He had he'd gone way above his authority in seizing the federal arsenal in St. Louis. It had 60,000 muskets, 1.5 million mini-ball cartridges, some artillery, and so forth. It was a inestimable value cache of arms that everybody needed at the time. And Governor Claiborne Jackson, who was an avowed secessionist, was going to seize it for the Confederacy, and he was trying to push Missouri out of the Union and into the seceded states and join the Confederacy. Lyon, being a captain, he distinguished himself in the Mexican War, was a very brave man, courageous man. And he got wind that the Confederates, the militia had established what they call Camp Jackson on the outskirts of St. Louis. Several thousand men there. And they were making no secret, we're going in and seize the arsenal. Lyon put on a woman's dress and a hat with a veil, because by this time he's got a big red beard.
Right.
So he dresses in a long woman's dress and covers his face so obviously they wouldn't see the beard. Gets in a barouche carriage and has the driver drive him to the St. Louis Arsenal so he could see for himself what's going on. And he heard the mutterings and the murmurings, and he saw that the Confederates are about to seize this arsenal, and that can't happen. So even though he was only a captain, he took action that was far beyond his rank. It should have been at least a brigadier general, if not a major general. But Captain Lyon seized the moment, and he brought in federal troops, and they captured the United States Arsenal with all those arms, most of them sent across the river into Illinois to arm, as it turned out, Illinois soldiers. And where I saw, I had gotten in to see Fremont May the 10th, and he had seized the arsenal the day before. On the 10th, he's marching all those Confederate prisoners through St. Louis to a prison. In looking backward, he might have used a little better judgment than march all those Confederate soldiers through St. Louis, which was evenly at best southern, northern in feeling. He says in the reports, after action reports, that somebody fired a weapon at his troops. Civilians say his soldiers fired weapons at them. It's much like the Boston Massacre. Nobody really knows who fired the first shot. But when the smoke cleared, there were 28 soldiers and civilians, some of them women and children, dead on the streets of St. Louis. It was quite the brouhaha. But once Lyon's troops opened up, the crowd, at minimum, the crowd knew he meant business. And they let them pass. And Lyons effectively defended his actions. Now, after May the 10th, I went back to Illinois, did the mustering in, got my commission on June 17th, moved troops in July, get to Mexico and into Ironton, accept the BG, the Brigadier General rank. So I'm in the eastern part of Missouri. But at that time, I must emphasize with you, at that time, even though I'd been looking at the maps, studying the maps, and had come to feel the rivers were the way to go.
Mhm.
Because the Tennessee River goes down all the way across Tennessee up into North Alabama and into Chattanooga and Knoxville. The Mississippi, obviously, all the way to New Orleans, and all that Midwestern shipping and the old Northwest Ordinance states, remember our history, with all the agricultural produce, and do not forget the Industrial Revolution that has long been in effect with steam power, and all of these industries, John Deere and his farm implements, they're all wanting to ship those goods, as they've been doing, down to New Orleans, and they can't. A stopper's been put in the jug by the Confederates. So I had come to feel the rivers are the way to go. But as I'm looking at the Mississippi River, I had to turn my gaze to southwestern Missouri, where Nathaniel Lyon, he's fought some fights at Boonville and at Carthage, didn't rise to the dignity of a battle, but they were some pretty sharp little fights. And he's moving southwest because former Governor Sterling Price is in southwest Missouri, here around the Springfield area, and he's got 8,000 Missouri State Guard, Reed, Missouri Militia, Confederate leaning, and Ben McCulloch out of Texas has come up to his northeast with about 3,000 Confederate soldiers. There's also a substantial contingent of Arkansas state troops. And remember, in August of '61, it's still so early in the war that we haven't solidified into the Army of the Potomac, the Army of Northern Virginia, and so forth. There's still state guards, there's still state militia, and there are Confederate troops. So just about 10 miles from where we sit, there were 11,000 Confederate soldiers, Missouri State Guard, and Arkansas State Guard, Missouri Militia and Arkansas State Guard. And Lyon is coming down from the northeast to the southwest, and a fight's going to happen here near Springfield. It occurred, though, at Wilson's Creek. Now, the Confederate soldiers on August the 9th of 1861, Confederate soldiers filtered into Wilson's Creek area. They camped on both sides of Wilson's Creek, not far from a promontory, kind of like a mesa tabletop area, and some fields that came to be known as the Bloody Field, Bloody Hill. And they were going to attack Lyon, Nathaniel Lyon, who's now a brigadier general. He's been, because of what happened at the armory, he's been promoted to a brigadier general. So he's bringing about 5,500 troops. Now think about it. He's got 5,500 or so troops. Sterling Price, Ben McCulloch, Missouri, Texas, have about 11,000. But 2,000 men of those forces are unarmed. They have no weapons. But McCulloch of Texas didn't want Price to bring those 2,000 unarmed men. But Sterling Price said, oh no, we're bringing those men, because when a soldier falls and cannot any longer fire his weapon, one of these men will take that weapon and continue the fight. Good thinking on General Price's part. They were going to hit Lyon, who was on the 9th here in Springfield, Missouri, and he moved out. They were both trying to surprise the other. The irony of one of the ironies of the Battle of Wilson's Creek is that they both intended to jump the other come daylight on the morning of August 10th. However, when Price's men, and he had surrendered command to Ben McCulloch, Price had about 8,000, McCulloch had about 3,000. Price outranked McCulloch, but was a state position at the time, and McCulloch said, "I'm not going to fight this battle unless I'm in command. My 3,000, the Arkansas state troops, and yours." Price, wisely enough, surrendered the command to McCulloch because his attitude, he was a fighter. His attitude, I don't care who's in command, let us hit the enemy.
Right.
So they were going to move out on the 9th and surround Lyon's forces. But outside activities, it began to rain fairly heavily. Since it's so early in the war, the troops didn't have the leather cartridge pouches with the heavy leather cover. They were carrying their paper cartridges in their pockets. And if it's in the rain, cartridges get wet and they can't fire their weapons. So Price and McCulloch, now in command, calls them all back into their camp there right at Wilson's Creek. They're camped along both sides. But they didn't put out pickets because it was raining. This is early in the war. Things were done that wouldn't be done later. They didn't put out pickets in the rain. So Lyon, as he's coming in to try to jump the Confederates, he is able to split his force. And he sent Franz Sigel, the German former school teacher, immigrant, who's now in command of a contingent of the federal forces, takes about 1,200 troops around behind McCulloch and Price's troops with an artillery battery, Totten's battery, which becomes important. And Lyon is northeast of Wilson's Creek. Sigel is southwest, and at first light, they're going to open their guns and attack the Confederate contingency there. Well, remember now, the Confederates didn't have any pickets out, so they're blind. And not having the pickets allowed Sigel to go all the way around the Confederate forces. First daybreak, Ben McCulloch and Sterling Price are having breakfast, and then the artillery goes off. That was a moment of, oh no, what is happening now? They bolted for their troops. Well, as it turns out, at first, the battle went in favor of the federal forces. I should say here that the Battle of Wilson's Creek is the second battle of the Civil War. That's one of the significant issues that should be remembered about Wilson's Creek. And people don't think, looking at the Trans-Mississippi Theater, and this is in the Trans-Mississippi Theater, they don't realize, too few people realize, Wilson's Creek is the second major battle of the war.
And a very important.
And a very important one, only after Bull Run. But like Bull Run, at first it went for the Federals, and then the Confederates took the day at Wilson's Creek. At first it went with the Federals, but after three massive charges up Bloody Hill, after 6 hours of combat, between 1 and 2 o'clock, the Federal forces pulled back. Another significant issue in the Battle of Wilson's Creek is that General Lyon was killed.
Right.
And in fact, he'd been wounded twice. He was leading his horse on Bloody Hill, and trying to rally his troops to attack the Confederates in between the 2nd and the 3rd Confederate surge. And a shell burst had gone off, and concussion and the shell fragment hit him in the head. He'd already been grazed on his leg, so he's wounded twice. Second in command, Samuel Sturgis, later General Sturgis, took Lyon back to medical treatment away from the combat, and Lyon even said, "I fear the day is lost." Well, Sturgis said, "No, it's not. We will save the day." Lyon, frankly, he was addled. The shell burst addled him, but he got himself under control, regained his senses, goes back to his troops and leading. It was described as leading a valiant charge. He got back on his horse and he raised his hat over his head, leading a valiant charge, and he was hit dead center with a minie ball that pierced his heart. He was dead before he hit the ground. So General Nathaniel Lyon has the very dubious distinction of being the first general officer killed in the Civil War. When the Federals fell back, they left him on the field. The Confederate forces, McCulloch's forces, retrieved his body, took him to the Ray House, which is on the Wire Road, which is the road that runs from Jefferson Barracks to Fort Smith, Arkansas. It was a major thoroughfare, overland stage stop. And they washed his body and prepared him, covered him in a drape that the family had, and delivered him to Federal forces in Springfield. Then the Federal forces pulled out, and he was again abandoned. But Mrs. Phelps, former Missouri Governor Phelps' wife, buried him in her garden because she knew the Confederates were coming, and they didn't have the best of intentions if they found General Lyon's body. Now, lore has it that she actually buried him not only in her garden, but underneath her rose bushes. Even if that's not true, it's a wonderful story.
Sure.
But General Lyon was ultimately recovered and buried in Arlington National Cemetery. The Federals fell back and retreated back towards St. Louis to the northeast. McCulloch would not pursue them. Now, Sterling Price was infuriated. He kept saying, hit them, attack them. And McCulloch said, no, he declined. With that, the Arkansas troops went back across the border into Arkansas. Sterling Price took his troops and moved out of the area, back up along the west side of the state and a little to the north. And Ben McCulloch took his, not quite now, 3,000 troops and went back south as well. And like Bull Run, another similarity, the battle was to no avail. It started out well for Federals, ended with a Confederate victory. Like Bull Run, it didn't settle anything, it didn't resolve anything. A lot of men died and wounded to no real purpose. In fact, another significance of the battle at Wilson's Creek is that it's one of the bloodiest battles of the entire war. Of the 5,500 Federal troops that Nathaniel Lyon had, he suffered some 1,250 killed and wounded, 25% casualty rate. That's horrendous. Of the 11,000 Confederate troops, they had about 1,350 of their men killed and wounded, and that was 12.5% casualty rates. So when you think about the numbers of troops involved in the Battle of Wilson's Creek and the casualty rates, it is one of the bloodiest battles of the entire Civil War. And people should know that.
Oh, certainly. Well, thank you so much for this history about Missouri's part in the Civil War 160 years ago. So thank you for being here, General Grant. If you want to find out more about General and the Civil War and just Missouri's history in general, come by the Christian County Library. We've got lots of other sources for information here and check out other programs at our website, christiancountylibrary.org. Thank you.